I'm not too young. These symptoms are real, these are happening. And so that's another myth that really bothers me. And then lastly, that you have to wait until menopause to start menopausal hormone therapy. Now, the term, of course, is confusing, right? It's menopausal hormone therapy. And here's Dr. Hirsch saying you can use it. But that's a big myth. So a lot of women are left to suffer. Their doctors are told, well, we can't start that until it's been 12 months of no period. That could mean X years of absolute, tornado of symptoms. And that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Thanks for watching Hot Flashes and Cool Topics podcast. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell to catch all of our conversations. Now, on to the show.
Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. We have on today one of our favorite guests, Dr. Heather Hirsch. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Just two of my favorite hosts. I'm so happy to spend the afternoon with you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah.
We are so grateful because honestly, it's funny. Back from when we taped in your basement to now, it has been such a wonderful experience watching you explode in your journey and helping so many women. And you have a new book coming out. But before we get started with that, I wanted to ask you about, you went and spoke in front of the FDA about the black box on vaginal estrogen. And you were very eloquent, as you always are. But could you talk about that experience and do you think it's going to make a difference?
Thank you so much for asking about that because, again, I've gotten to do so many amazing things, met amazing people, be on some amazing stages. But before that clock, kind of went and it was ticking down, I was really nervous. And it's interesting because I think that goes to show for me that the women who are watching this movement are really so important to me. Like, I really wanted to do a great job. And being on that panel was something I was really proud of. And at the time, it struck me that this could maybe backfire if people think this is something that I think is political, which of course I don't. But you know what? I didn't think any of that should hold me back. The chance to really speak my truth and talk about how important it is to keep women safe by taking that label off was a wonderful, wonderful experience and opportunity. And I think that unequivocally, all menopause clinicians, specialists, even those who are not saying menopause is their specialist, really all do believe that the box label warning should be removed from the local vaginal estrogen. And I think we made that point pretty darn clear. Now, as to what's going to happen next, we weren't given really any clue as to what might happen next, to the point where that was a reason some people didn't want to participate in the panel, and that's up to them, is because they really wanted to ensure that their time was going to be meaningful. But we were always told we will see where this will go. So I am still waiting with bated breath to see where this will go. But what a wonderful experience. Thank you to the hundreds of thousands of women who watched that FDA panel. People messaged me. They were in tears. They were so moved. They had goosebumps. We were changing the world. And so it was just an honor to be on the panel and to be able to speak for all women.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate so much all of you that did this. I mean, you're starting out, the stories that were shared, the experiences. It really meant a lot to a lot of women, and it's just going to help a lot of women as well. I just really appreciate everything that all these doctors did to go up there for women and just say, this is what is needed for women. And it is. It really is.
It was really special to get so many different clinicians in different fields together to agree on how to just go through that allotted time that we had. And I think we did such an excellent job. I think we knocked it out of the park. And it seems to be the consensus that most women thought, who watched it, or men who watched it, that, we really made the points. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go.
Do you find that now that there seems to be a group of doctors that are really moving this conversation forward? Because you were one of the first ones and you were kind of doing it on your own, what's it like now having kind of a team behind you or with you?
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, because now you can amplify your voice and you have you can really share those messages. So you can cross promote, but also what's not only just helpful in that is that you can reach more people, is that the women themselves will now hear consistent messages from 2, 3, 4, 5 or so clinicians. And even up from there on bigger podcasts or on the news or on big shows. And so that's really validating for women. And so this really means that we can go from a small grassroots to making big changes, both from the level of, of course, for me, it's a lot of training. I think that's so important. So having more emphasis on training, and then upwards through professional societies. We're seeing, just skyrocketing numbers of clinicians being certified by the Menopause Society. This is all great. And then also when we have societal shifts from things like, whether it's celebrities or it's big media personalities talking about these as well, these are going to create massive ripple effects that will change the next generation. And that sounds so like, so aspirational, but I really think that's achievable by having so many now voices and clinicians who become, friends and collaborate and work together. That's what allows us to achieve.
Right. And, I think back to when we did our first interview with you back in like 2000 during lockdown. And,
Yes.
you were in our basement, and look what's happened since then. And you've done so much since then. I mean, you've written 2 books since then, and your latest is coming out October 14th. It is the Perimenopausal Survival Guide.
Yeah.
And make sense of your symptoms and build your personalized treatment plan. And I said to you earlier before we started recording how I wish so badly something like this was out there when I was going through perimenopause, because I was so lost. I didn't know what was happening. What made you feel that just the importance of right now sharing these stories?
I jokingly have been referring to perimenopause as menopause's little sister. And some of my patients called it menopause's evil little sister. And, really, menopause has definitely had its moment, and it still is. To say that it's over or that we've exhausted the topic, I don't even think we're there yet, because there are still millions of women who are just now learning about it. But at the same time, women who have, are still having periods, have not gotten to that final menstrual period. This can span an entire decade. This can be a woman's whole 40s. This could be from 37 to 47. And a lot of similarities exist, but enough differences exist that if you were in your 40s, you might have no idea that this was hormonal. Because it's easy to think menopause is for your mom or your grandmother, right? It's easy when you're, not there yet to think it's so far off. Of course, we know it's not. And time is this, mysterious little thing. But I really wanted to help women, even before they got into the throes of menopause, understand what could be happening to them. And I know you guys are, interviewing just incredible experts in menopause. And the sooner women can start to piece together how important those little sex hormones are, that they do so much more than just allow us to do breast milk and reproduce. They're really actually functioning from head to toe, from the brain fog to the cardiovascular system, the bones, and etc. The earlier they can see what hormonal impacts can really change their health, the better. And so I had so many women read my first book and kind of say, no, and I think on this, and I kind of tell they felt a little lost, and I realized they were in perimenopause. So the menopause type didn't make any sense to them because they were not yet in menopause. They were in the throes of perimenopause. And so that's kind of why I really think that it's having its moment. It's adjacent, but it's still different enough. And it's now including women who may have not heard the term menopause and may not be in the quote menopause movement, to really realize what's happening. So, we're starting to think about the women who are in their 30s and 40s who've never heard these terms before and trying to educate them now.
There are so many different factors that go into perimenopause. And I think, again, your book does it beautifully, like your first book did, in really explaining and categorizing what the different types of symptoms are. But I wanted to start with, I think a really important thing is that you talk about in the book, you have to understand that menopause is when your hormones are lower, but kind of stable at that point. Perimenopause is when you're on the roller coaster ride of hormones and you don't know what day, because I think there are women out there that think, I'm just going to go get a blood test and whatever my hormones are, I'll know from there. So I love that you really talk about that in the book. And could you explain it to our listeners a little more?
Yes. So this is kind of the hormonal havoc that happens in this stage. And there's a couple things that are happening. So you're right. In menopause, they're low and they're steady. In perimenopause, your estrogen, it's lowering, but it's also very volatile. So it's bouncing around. This is why you can have breast tenderness and cry at the drop of a hat one moment and then feel like the Sahara Desert the next moment. Like there's just sort of no rhyme or reason. And it can really make women feel, you know, like you're going crazy. And I hate to say that because I do not think that that is what's happening. But as someone who has now experienced this herself, I get that feeling of like, what the heck's happening to me? And the progesterone's also just beginning to lower. So this is when anxiety and insomnia can spike. I have had my first experiences of perimenopause. Even just the last week, I've woken up, I've had the 4 a.m. awakening with anxiety for no reason. No reason. I think maybe my sleep's getting a little lighter because my progesterone's declining. And so I'm thinking and I'm waking up and I'm like feeling anxious. And I just kind of hold my heart and hold my belly. But with perimenopause, because so many women are experiencing this hormonal havoc, they're still bleeding, and their doctors say you're too young for menopause. They're thinking, do I need to go to a psychiatrist? Do I need to get on antidepressants? Do I need to, do CBT? Do I need to see a sleep medicine specialist? Do I need to see my primary care? And that's kind of how this whirlwind then starts to go. And it could be for many women the first time that they're actually utilizing the healthcare system outside of pap smears and babies. And it can be really scary. You both probably remember. And that's what perimenopause can lead to if we don't know what hormonal havoc is happening is misdiagnosis and mistreatment, or maybe overtreatment or undertreatment or the wrong treatment. And it's such a big deal. But again, menopause can be crystal clear. Okay, no periods in 16 months. This could be menopause. Even a doctor who is just learning about menopause, because we've been talking about it, can piece that together. But perimenopause can be such a different beast because of that hormonal havoc. You're still having periods, and sometimes they're heavier. Sometimes you're missing them. I actually joke that like one of the ways you know you're in perimenopause is you get a pregnancy test, even though you know there's no chance you could be pregnant. Your partner's on the other side of the room. You haven't seen them in 2 months, but you're like, why did I not get a period? This is your entry into perimenopause. So there's so much in this hormonal havoc that's so different than menopause.
And that's something I love about your book. I mean, you've divided it up. You've got 3 parts, and then each of those parts have different chapters. And I love that you include myths, you
Mm-hmm.
include what could what not to use, what
Mm-hmm.
to use,
Mm-hmm.
and things you can use at home. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you do every single chapter. I love that. And then the myths are so great, even though I've gone through this already. But
Yeah.
when you hear these myths that people say, and I love that you address that there is a lot of misinformation out there on
Mm-hmm.
social media, and you really want to help women find the safe, right path for it. Can
Mm-hmm.
you share some of the myths that just drive you bonkers about
Oh
this?
my gosh, there's a lot of myths, but a lot of the myths actually come, I think, from the healthcare profession, which, for example, you touched on is the lab work, right? So there is a myth that lab work is helpful or that it will solidify a diagnosis. Now, both of you have been in this field getting your your MD degree. And so you both know, of course, there's no lab test that would rule in or rule out perimenopause, but it's important to say again because we've got a lot of direct to consumer lab tests or companies that are trying to help women diagnose themselves, but a lab test can't diagnose you with perimenopause. Now, I might still check labs for my patients, and that's individual, and that might help us kind of get more data. But that's a big myth that lab testing can tell you if you're in perimenopause or not. And a lot of clinicians will actually perseverate that myth. Another big one is that you're too young. This myth drives me absolutely bonkers. And I see women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Now, there's lots of reasons I see younger women. Sometimes I'm seeing them now for PMS, PMDD, which is PMS on steroids, PCOS, infertility. I mean, most of the time I'm doing perimenopause and menopause, but you can have perimenopause early if your menopause is early. And so there's no such thing as you are too young. We have average ages because we need to know average ages as physicians. Protocols can be helpful, but the more we're learning about this topic, the more we realize maybe the average is even not correct. And so you can never be too young. So, to that point, it's to always like to be actionable. Start journaling and tracking if you're even either a woman in perimenopause or you're in menopause, but you have friends, colleagues, girlfriends who are in perimenopause. Start journaling and tracking your periods and your symptoms, what makes them better, what's making them worse, i.e., red wine, and all the things that we normally like. Um, but that actually gives you ammo to say, I'm not too young. These symptoms are real, these are happening. And so that's another myth that really bothers me. And then lastly, that you have to wait until menopause to start menopausal hormone therapy. Now, the term, of course, is confusing, right? It's menopausal hormone therapy. And here's Dr. Hirsch saying you can use it. But that's a big myth. So a lot of women are left to suffer. Their doctors are told, well, we can't start that until it's been 12 months of no period. That could mean X years of absolute, tornado of symptoms. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. So I do spend a majority of the book kind of breaking that down and how I do prescribe menopausal hormone therapy. I was very clear on those definitions at the FDA panel for women in perimenopause. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's three myths that still really bother me.
And I think, again, you also created this collective that you're doing or collaborative where you're educating doctors because so many women will email us and say, but I don't have a doctor near me. The doctors that are certified are nowhere near my small little town. So can you talk a little bit just as a side on your collaborative and why it's so important, why you love doing that?
Yes, I think of myself first and foremost, honestly, as a teacher. And even my patients, the women that see me, I would say we spend, yes, I help diagnose and prescribe, but a lot of times I'm teaching what symptoms are normal. Why do you expect them? Why will this medication help? And that really also extends into teaching for healthcare professionals and women. So I also started teaching how to prescribe and manage menopausal hormone therapy because, at the time when I first saw you, there was probably maybe 1,500 clinicians who were certified by, let's say, the Menopause Society. Now, I mean, these numbers have skyrocketed to over 10,000. And so I really wanted to, ensure good treatment with FDA approved, hormone replacement therapy because so many women were put on pellets or unnecessary medication. So I've now trained probably north of 2,000 healthcare professionals, whether they're nurse practitioners, PAs, MDs, DOs. I've got psychiatrists, I've got emergency room doctors, surgeons, and really what a gem that has been. And so if you are looking for a clinician, you can use the Heather Hirsch directory. So that's heatherhirschdirectory.com that lists everyone who's taken my class, which means, of course, we have autonomy to prescribe, but they have sort of understood the philosophy of how to prescribe and why and the safety of menopausal hormone therapy in both perimenopause and menopause. And then, my practice has now increased to have 12 clinicians to take care of women. And it's, what a joy to be in this time. Me and Bridget were talking about that. What a wonderful time to see so much energy and focus and support for midlife women's health. And I wake up every day and I think, how cool is it that I get to talk to you today, do podcasts, teach, work with the best minds, and help move women's health forward. So teaching has always been my favorite thing, and I just love being a part of building the next generation of not just clinicians, but really, I hope I'm helping create thought leaders in this field.
Absolutely. And we need that. I can remember that first podcast, and I remember you saying that because you had just opened the women's clinic, Brigham Clinic in
Yes.
Boston. And I think I remember you saying there were maybe 30 at the time.
I remember that.
Yes,
Yes.
that really stuck out. It really just, I remember thinking, this is, oh my gosh, something's got to happen, and it's happening. And
Yeah.
I also really liked in your book that you talked about just all the different types of
Hmm.
menopause hormone replacement for perimenopause, things that are coming about, IUDs. You talk about the different types of IUDs and what
Yeah.
has progesterone and what doesn't have it. And then also, people are very concerned about pain. Can you
Hmm.
address a pain involved with inserting an IUD? But you talked
Yes.
about something else that
Yeah.
helps. Yes. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
I am glad we're talking about this because we've seen this be published in big media as well as, this procedure of an IUD placement and ignoring women's pain, which historically doesn't bode well because we have ignored women's pain and suffering, i.e. the menopause movement, right? Like it's been for far too long. And one of the barriers I see for a lot of women for IUD insertions is the fear and the pain, and that's completely valid. Why I like to break down, what we're doing and how we can reduce that pain is because for many women, not all, and again, I always like to present women with lots of different options, but in perimenopause, when you're dealing with a lot of heavy bleeding, which can lead to its own set of symptoms, but you also have symptoms of the hormonal havoc. Sometimes being able to stop or slow the bleeding can really help overall the quality of life. Sometimes, if there's progesterone intolerance, an intrauterine device can be helpful because the progesterone's not going to the whole body, it's just going to the uterus. So, removing pain as a barrier is huge. Now, there is when the procedure is done, you can numb the cervix. The cervix is what has the nerve endings, but the IUD sits in the uterus. The uterus actually doesn't have a lot of nerve endings. That's why you could be pregnant if you've ever been pregnant as a woman. It's not like comfortable every day, but it's not like pain like someone like a burning pain all the time because you actually don't have a lot of nerve endings in your uterus. The cervix, on the other hand, is very sensitive and does not like to be touched. And so you could do a cervical block where you numb the cervix to be able to place the IUD. Now, interestingly, the historical, because I was an OBGYN intern, and this was, 15 or so years ago. And I had learned, well, if the numbing of the cervix is painful, so just skip that and place the IUD. Now, I'm not sort of kind of putting anyone under the bus here, but that was sort of the thought process. Now, I equate that to, well, a cavity is painful, but so is the numbing. So just skip the numbing and go straight to drilling the cavity. Would you want that? No.
Ooh.
Me up, even though now these might not be perfect examples, but if you've ever had a cavity, you know that the needle, it's a little painful, but you'll sit through that because then the rest of the procedure is less painful. And so you can numb the cervix as well, which is the organ that really feels the sort of more of that acute pain of the IUD placement. The other thing is you want to make sure it's placed correctly, and that has to do with experience, which now we've had a lot more time placing IUDs. And so, if we can remove a barrier like the fear of the pain of the insertion, that's something that healthcare professionals can do, and it's something patients can ask their doctor if they want to have an IUD placement. Say, will you be able to ease the pain by either numbing my cervix or a cervical block?
I think the second part of your book, when you're kind of choose your own adventure, it's really important that a lot of women don't know which symptom is the worst. Like,
Mhm.
they're having three or four symptoms. It goes into different categories. And you talk about the 75% rule, which was really
Yes.
helpful in reading it. But can you
Yes.
talk, because women are going in with these sometimes they think unrelated symptoms, but they're actually very important to note.
hmm And the way I kind of do this and the way I was really encouraged to write it is what do you do with your patients? Since I still see my patients every week. In fact, I saw two patients today. And so what I really kind of help them do is first think about, is there one symptom where if you think that's better, it could potentially help ease up the other symptoms? So for a lot of women, it's sleep. They'll say, you know what? If my sleep gets better, I bet maybe my mood would get better, maybe the less brain fog, maybe less snacking, maybe the weight. And we're like, okay, let's hone in on that symptom. So I like to kind of ask them what symptom, if we got better, would help all of the other things. Or another way I'll say this is I haven't said it in a while. So I'll say, if I had a magic wand, because now most people know I don't, and I could, alleviate one symptom, the most bothersome one, what would it be? And for everyone, it's different. Sometimes they'll say it's honestly the libido and the pain because my intimacy and then the marriage and then the fighting and then the kids. So everyone's really different. So I have them help pick out the one symptom. Then a lot of women who come to me were thinking about using menopausal hormone therapy, or it may not be MHT. That is not the one and only thing I prescribe, but let's use that because we're still kind of on this wavelength. And lots of times we're using this as a diagnostic tool as well as therapeutic. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say they're like, maybe it's the joint aches and pains. And they say, if the joint aches and pains would go away, I wouldn't wake up as much in the middle of the night. I would sleep the night. I would get up earlier. I would go on my morning run. I would see my friends. I would be social. I'd be more productive. And we're thinking, okay, great. But she's thinking, I don't know if this is hormonal. So, okay, that's the first thing. Let's try menopausal hormone therapy and see if it's both diagnostic, it rules it in or rules it out. And if it does, then Colleen, I want my patients who are using hormone therapy to be at least 70 to 80% better. That's always my benchmark as a clinician. And, doing this for the last 10, 12 years, it's definitely achievable, particularly once we've rolled in. Ah, yes, it is hormonal. I had one patient who was going to go to Mayo Clinic if it wasn't hormonal. And for her, the menopausal hormone therapy didn't help. Now, while she was like, darn, I wished it would, she felt a lot better doing that extra trip to see that specialist because common things happen commonly. Perimenopause will happen to everyone. But for just as though I have her, my one patient who did go see a specialist, 8 out of 10 actually found that the menopausal hormone therapy was really effective. They canceled their other specialists, and that one thing then helped the joint aches, pains, then the sleep, and then, on and on. You can see how it goes from there. And so that's kind of how I actually write it and teach it in the book and help you, with some journal prompts and write things down. So each journey is so individualized. But, with just a couple of reframing and prompting and then working with a knowledgeable clinician, you can gain so much valuable information before, a whole decade's gone by.
Right. I mean, that second section was, just the different chapters, things that I never thought about when I thought back about when I was going through perimenopause and the bleeding till you drop.
Yep.
I thought, oh my goodness. I know that when I went to just my regular primary care physician, I didn't know that my periods were going to get this heavy. I have 9 sisters. 8 of them are older than me, and they didn't tell me they did not tell me that they were going to be like this. Like you've described a woman that was a teacher in your book, and I was a teacher. And I've said this before on our podcast. I was on a bus on a field trip, just bleeding through everything. Luckily I had dark jeans, but I mean, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And then I thought, well, my goodness, I might have been anemic. It can, I don't know this now, but after reading your book, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, these are things that could be happening to you. And you also talked about the 4 pillars of health.
Yeah.
And how all of this kind of ties into the 4 pillars of health. Health.
Yeah.
Health. Do you mind sharing what those pillars are and then how that is so helpful in this time?
Yes. And I hear you on the bleeding. And, again, this is a topic that's not in most menopause books because mostly menopause is characterized by your bleedings being done. Now, there is some touching on, bleeding after menopause, but this heavy, bleeding really impacts our health, just like you said, in so many ways. And, one of the other things I'm also realizing as I'm going through perimenopause is it's not just about, treating it's not just about hormone therapy in a way, or it's not just about what's the one medication. I mean, as a clinician, yes, I definitely think about that a lot. And patients often need that before they can start thinking about their mental health and their nutrition, just because you gotta feel at least a little bit better before you start, meal prepping. But it is really about the whole picture. And even at the collaborative, which is the telemedicine practice, we've included wellness partners because my 4 pillars of health is so important. I even want my patients to experience this. It's not just for my books, it's really how I treat patients, which is just such a beautiful thing. So, the 4 pillars is your mental health, your nutrition, your movement or exercise, but I like the word movement better, and your sleep. And we really address these holistically, and I address them in the book because once you get to 70% better on your treatment, or that's my goal, you need to also then start including these pillars and forming these good habits now. And that is going to set you up for just, wonderful next chapter. And this is really this crucial moment where we can reform habits. We have a lot of neuroplasticity, as you know, you've talked with Lisa Mosconi. There's lots of neuroplasticity around this time as well. And so it's like a wonderful time to form new habits, get rid of the ones that don't serve us and add the new ones in. And I'm just so excited that I, bring this to life, write it in my book, and I can't wait for people to read it and sort of see how I really get to help women navigate all of these things.
And again, it is so comprehensive, just like your other book. You talk about the history behind why women are afraid to take menopausal hormone therapy. And it's so important for women to understand that because we're now getting into a generation, what do they call it, millennial pause or
Yes,
whatever
yes,
it's called,
pause,
where
yeah.
they're not even going to know about what happened in the early 2000s. So it's really
Mhm.
important that they remember and they learn about what is happening now and also adding the element of fertility, which is
Yeah.
not something that we had to deal with when we were, because usually we were done by then. But you talk about that in the book. Can you go a little bit into detail about the fact that some women are just starting their journey on having kids and perimenopause is right at the door?
Yes. Oh my goodness. You guys are remembering some of the best parts of my books. And I've seen as the years have gone on, women who have children later in life. I've had 3 geriatric pregnancies. So I understand that. And some women are utilizing, assisted reproductive technology. So IUI or IVF to have their miracle babies. And, when you're later in life, what is the stressors that might put on your ovarian reserve, because I see a lot of women go from IVF to postpartum to perimenopause overnight. And so I address a lot of that. Could it be that? How do you know if it's postpartum versus perimenopause? I have been actually talking about this over on my Instagram, or I'm going to start talking about this topic as well. And even the fact that for women in perimenopause who had their sights on their miracle baby, menopausal hormone therapy is only helpful. It might not be the full treatment by any means, but it actually can help to kickstart some of that ovarian reserve as well. If you're already in perimenopause or you've already been told, gosh, your chances are low because you're in your 40s, or whatever the story might be. And so I want to clear up some of these new questions that are coming, I'm seeing online in my DMs from my patients about this time. And so I get to clarify some of those things in my book, and some of them are still left to be researched because no surprise to you two, we don't have enough research, but it is something I am seeing a lot. Now, I do want to say that could be like the biased that those patients come to see me. So there could be many women who do IVF and then have a baby and they're great and they don't have these symptoms for a while. But for the women that do, I do want to, help them. And I am wondering, is this more of what's really happening, or is this just what I am seeing? And so opening this dialogue will be helpful as well. It's almost like, we're starting to peel the layers off. It's like menopause became the focal point, and now we're going younger and older, right? And it's really interesting to see how we can use menopause instead of maybe what used to be like pregnancy. in a way, pregnancy was kind of like the end of the story. And now we're saying, you know what, the focal point might be menopause and what comes after that, and then what comes before that, and sort of using that as sort of a grounding place. Isn't that cool? I mean, I'm just kind of saying that as I'm
No, it's
talking,
true.
but
Mhm.
as we're thinking about all these complex topics, all the hormonal changes that women go through, I call perimenopause hormonal havoc. So was IVF. And so, there's a lot of similarities, and I want to help women really differentiate so that they can be the best, so that they can thrive, all of those things.
Right. And you also include how, hey, if you're still having your period and they're still slowing down, you could still get pregnant. I mean, that is a very big point.
That's
Anything
like
is possible.
Yes.
Exactly. That's the
That's like your word.
opposite.
I didn't go through menopause till I was 55. That would have been my worst nightmare, honestly. I used to kid my daughters that they would have to raise the child. If I get pregnant,
Exactly.
you'd be
Exactly.
raising the baby because I that time has passed.
You
Yeah.
know,
But
that is such a funny thing to mention right after we talked about, wanting to conceive and being an older mom. The exact opposite could happen. You could have your 3.5 kids or 2.5 kids, and there's many oops babies. And that's also a myth that you can't get pregnant in perimenopause either. So, do talk about when should you think about contraception, or how could you treat your perimenopausal symptoms, or Dr. Hirsch is always talking about menopausal hormone therapy. How do I do that and also prevent pregnancies? We already talked about one, the IUD. And so, isn't it? I mean, I think this topic is never ending and fascinating. And, you can see how they all kind of can come back to the same focal point of knowing what's happening to a woman's body is something we haven't historically done a very good job at. And we're in this wonderful place and wonderful atmosphere with these beautiful resources and books. And like you mentioned, Colleen, so many people coming together, forming, friendships and connections across social media and etc., that it's really helping to push women's health forward.
It
I,
absolutely is. Yeah. And I do love too that you include the appendixes in the book as well, like things to take and what to ask. And that's always so helpful because you also, I like how you say, make a special appointment. Don't,
Mhm.
yes,
Yeah.
don't include it. Try not to your yearly checkup, try to make a special appointment. Tell them this is what I want to talk about.
right, because most women don't even know they can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. I was just in Boston too. And I said, to this group of lovely executive women, yep, call the doctors and say, I want to make a perimenopause appointment, or menopause or sexual health. And, I really think this point is really key, that women still, if possible, you start with your OB/GYN or your primary care or your family medicine doctor, because that is doing something massively important. Just like Colleen had asked me, if enough women do talk to their primary care, after 8 to 15 women ask them about perimenopause or make perimenopause appointments, and they're thinking to themselves, I need to get retrained in this. There's that cycle of love. Then they're getting the training that they need. And so we're actually, as the women who are laying the groundwork, really pushing the medical profession to do better for women. So I love that. Make an acute visit, just like you would call for pneumonia or a sinus infection. You call and say it's perimenopause or menopause. And you've got that 30 minutes where you've tracked your symptoms, you bring them in, and that's how you avoid those myths of you're too young. Bring some resources with you, bring some of the incredible books, bring this podcast and, resources. You can always get a second opinion. There's lots and lots of options now, luckily for us. But something special happens when you start with your clinician is we're all just moving the collective forward.
And again, bring the book.
Bring the book.
Read the
Yes.
book, highlight the book, put little stickies where it applies to you, and be prepared. The best thing you
Yes.
can do is go in prepared for that time slot, so you have your questions And now that we have the information, we can ask the questions. I do also like in the book, and I appreciated that you talk about what you don't recommend, because
Mm-hmm.
I think, there's good and bad in any conversation, but, and Bridget and I have been on the end of people saying, why are you saying this? But there's a lot of social media out there that are pushing quick fixes for
Mm-hmm.
perimenopause and menopause. And, some people smell money and they're like, I'm going to go in. So it's so important that women listen to podcasts like this, to follow you on Instagram, to read the books. Does it concern you that there's some information out there that just is inaccurate?
Yes. 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 It's funny because I think for so many years, it frustrated me. I would lose sleep over things like pellets and some of the more harmful stuff on the spectrum. Sometimes it harms you because you're just throwing money away, in which case, of course, that still bothers me. And actually, all sorts of women then can really be hit by this, or all the way down to is actually harmful. So a lot of those things I actually kind of unfollowed because I would lose so much sleep over these conversations. So I think, if it sounds too good to be true, often it is. And I think, I'm glad that you notice how important that is, because knowing just what not to spend your time and money on is just as helpful as what to.
Right. And I love too that you also put for each section that you put contraindications, things that
Mhm.
could be. I really appreciate that, because
Yeah.
some it's going to be good for another symptom or another issue, but something may not be so good. So there's just so many great things that are addressed in here, and things that women feel like the weight gain,
Yep. Yep.
everything. They're dragging yourself through life. I mean,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
all of those things in there, women have so many questions about, and then they may not realize it has anything to do with perimenopause.
Menopause.
Yes.
Exactly. There is still, I think that there's a chance the three of us live in a bubble. And I know I do because my patients tell me, oh no, I still hear this stuff out in the wild, Dr. Hirsch. But, for me, it's probably even more insulated. But to remember that there are millions of women who've never, in their 41 years old, they're waking up in the middle of the night like me with the anxiety. They have no idea why this is happening. They've still never heard of perimenopause. Like, I really want to create a movement and really hope that the book is easy to read and fun to read, something you can share and talk about amongst your friends, so that these women who are currently, in their 40s don't have to experience some of the devastating years of neglect that women in their 50s or 60s have had. And I'm just so excited to be podcasting with you, to get the information out there, to be, such a part of what you've grown as well. This whole conversation's really been just so wonderful. I have the biggest smile on my face just talking about this topic with you both who care about it so much. And thank you for helping be a part of really spreading this information to women who need it.
Well, it's been our joy to watch just your success, because you really are giving back by creating an environment for the next generation of doctors that women are going to be able to, take for granted, that the conversation around
It's here. This,
perimenopause
yeah.
exists,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
word exists, even because, like Bridget said, she didn't even know the word
I didn't know
exists.
what it was when I was going through it. Didn't know what it was, hadn't heard of it. And I have 8 older sisters. And one
They did that on. I've talked to some of them. They did that on
they did it
purpose.
on purpose.
I'm
Yeah.
just
They
kidding.
wanted to spare
We
you, maybe. I
pointed and
don't know.
laughed.
And what's funny is
Yeah.
when I was stuck on my plane today, the gentleman who was sitting in the window was like, I need to get this for my wife. So I was like, I have to get in. I'm going to interview Dr. Hirsch. She wrote a book. Da, da, da. He's like, I need to get this book for my wife.
Yes.
So
That's a great point, Colleen. Men are problem solvers. They want to solve a problem. They want to help to solve a problem. And they see this in their partners or their wives or their girlfriends or their sisters. And they're thinking like, okay, we've got a solution. And men can be the gateway as well into helping us spread this information. They are excited because then they're like, okay, just like they're, now I always say, now they're putting cribs together because they're like, okay, I can do that. I can put the crib together. They're like, I can give you this book. I can read it too. I can help with some of the language. I can come to the doctor's appointment with you so I can remember some things if you've got brain fog. And they're really, really excited to help support their partners. And so I love that you shared that story because they're
Awesome.
such advocates too. We
And they're
forget.
going through it. They
They
have
are.
to live with the
Yeah.
partner that's losing,
Yes.
sometimes thinks they're losing their mind. And they can say,
Right.
no, remember, this is brain fog, or remember, this is your hormones. And so I think it's a great thing for men to, much better than a vacuum or, like
Yes. Yes. Just like, don't respond to my rage, my short fuseitis. And then in a few hours, just stay nice and calm. And that's better than anything you could ever do.
Yes.
and then just hand the book. And I have to say, I think your next book should be post menopause.
I was
Because
talking to her about that.
yes,
Yeah.
we have really, now that Bridge and I are but finally post menopause. Didn't think it was ever going to happen. But
Yeah.
wow, what a difference. What
Mhm.
and it really becomes a conversation on longevity at that point.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
what can you
Sure
do to
does.
keep your health? So I think, if we could suggest anything, we would say a book on postmenopause.
Because you're
So
not busy enough as
Oh.
it is. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I love thinking about this focal point of menopause instead of maybe women's health. The focal points a gestation. It's menopause and what's up here, what's above, what's below. Because really, to me, now that we're living into our 80s and 90s, menopause is technically the middle, the focal point, right? That's where you can kind of actually use as a much better timeline than other things. And women, I love this. I've always called myself an early, instead of being an internist, I always want to be a quality of lifeist. Quality of life is so crucial to me. And, it's easy to forget that in the thick of things, or if we're in survival, if something, dangerous or scary happens. But this is absolutely, now that we're getting through menopause more knowledgeable and with less sort of, hopefully, less years of suffering. That's the next question is like, okay, well, now I want to do this. I want to get an A+. I want to do this amazing. I want to live life to the fullest. I mean, this is the point where in women's lives they get to, I'm hoping, and you guys can tell me, we get to really enjoy the fruits of our labor.
Oh,
And so
yes.
you able to feel healthy and feel good and look good and feel sharp. I love that idea, Colleen.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Bravo.
you
Yeah.
don't care anymore.
You don't
The
care.
estrogen leaves and it takes all of the I care about what you think of me
And the
with it.
patches don't bring it back 100%. They
good.
bring back what you need, but you still don't care. Because I
Yes.
have my patch on.
Those
and
are
I
for
still don't care.
you. Those
I
are
know.
for
I
everyone
cannot
else.
wait. I cannot wait. I cannot
Yes.
wait for that. I
It
cannot.
really is.
Yes,
That's
it
what
really
we've been
is.
exploring because
I-
it's
yeah.
just we've been talking to a lot of women who are post 60 and we're like, we're kind of jealous.
It's like, I can't wait to
It's
turn
the new,
60.
oh yeah, 60 is like the new 20, basically.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
free again,
They're
right?
loving life and they don't want to go back to before.
No.
So, but
Yeah.
well, we are so excited to have talked to you about the Perimenopause Survival Guide. Make sense of your symptoms and build your personal treatment plan. Thank you so much, Dr. Hirsch. We love having you on, and we wish we could do it all the time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It's my pleasure. Can't wait to see you guys for the next round.